Hidden behind the parlor door of her father's ranch house, she heard every word, every laugh, every cruel joke about the mountain man fool enough to want the daughter nobody could stand. They thought they were dumping their problem onto some desperate stranger. They had no idea what they'd just done. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Walter Grayson didn't usually handle the mail himself. That was work for servants. But when his foreman handed him the thick envelope with the Mercer Ranch seal pressed into dark wax, something made him tear it open right there in the stable yard. He read it once, then again. Then he walked straight into the house without saying a word to anyone, his boots tracking mud across the floor his wife had just had cleaned. "Walter?" Caroline Grayson looked up from her embroidery, irritation flashing across her carefully maintained features. "Your boots. Get the girls, all three of them, right now." The tone stopped her mid-sentence. She set down her needlework and went upstairs without another word. 10 minutes later, the entire Grayson family stood in the main sitting room. Margaret, the eldest daughter, smoothed her silk dress and arranged herself on the settee with practiced grace. 19 years old and already engaged to a railroad executive's son, she carried herself like she'd been born wearing a crown. Sarah, 17 and just as polished, took the chair by the window, afternoon light catching the blonde curls she'd spent an hour setting that morning. Evelyn stood by the bookshelf. She hadn't bothered changing out of her work clothes, plain cotton dress, scuffed boots, hair pulled back in a braid that was coming loose. There was mud on her hands from helping old Thomas fix the fence behind the cattle pen. She'd washed most of it off, but her fingernails were still dirty. Margaret wrinkled her nose. "Really, Evelyn? Father calls a family meeting and you show up looking like a ranch hand?" "I am a ranch hand," Evelyn said flatly. "You're a Grayson," Caroline snapped. "Act like it." Walter cleared his throat. He was still holding the letter and his hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from excitement. "I've received a proposal," he said. Margaret sat up straighter. Sarah gasped and pressed her hands to her cheeks. Caroline's eyes went wide. "A proposal?" Margaret breathed. "For me? But I'm already engaged to—" "Not for you," Walter said. He looked down at the letter again, and a smile was starting to spread across his face. The kind of smile that made Evelyn's stomach tighten. "It's from Caleb Mercer." Silence. "The Caleb Mercer?" Caroline's voice had gone very quiet. "The mountain rancher?" "The same." Even Evelyn had heard of Caleb Mercer. Everyone in the territory had. He owned half the mountain range north of Red Hollow, thousands of acres of prime grazing land, timber forests, water rights that made him richer than most of the valley ranchers combined. He was somewhere in his 30s, never married, and lived up in his fortress of a ranch like some kind of wilderness king. People told stories about him, how he'd fought off a band of cattle rustlers single-handedly, how he'd survived 3 winters snowed in without losing a single head of livestock, how he'd turned down marriage proposals from women across 2 territories because none of them met his standards, and now he wanted to marry a Grayson daughter. Margaret's face had transformed into something radiant. "Father, I'm honored, truly, but William and I have already—" "He's not asking for you, Margaret." She blinked. "Sarah, then?" "No." Sarah looked confused. "But Father, there are only 3 of us." "He wants Evelyn." The words landed like a stone in still water. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Caroline started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was high and sharp and disbelieving, the kind of laugh that cuts. "Evelyn?" She turned to look at her middle daughter, and her expression was a mixture of shock and something that might have been relief. "He wants Evelyn?" Walter was reading from the letter now, his voice taking on the formal tone he used when conducting business. "Mr. Mercer writes that he's been aware of our family for some time. He's made his choice carefully. He specifically requests Evelyn's hand in marriage, and he's prepared to offer a substantial bride price." "How substantial?" Caroline interrupted. Walter named a figure that made both Margaret and Sarah gasp. Evelyn just stood there, her back pressed against the bookshelf, her dirty hands clenched at her sides. She felt like she was watching this happen to someone else, like she'd stepped outside her own body and was observing from a great distance. That's That's more than William's family offered for Margaret, Sarah said slowly. 3 times more, Walter confirmed. He was grinning now, open and wolfish. The man must be desperate. Caroline had stopped laughing, but her eyes were bright with something cruel. Well, how perfectly convenient. Convenient? Margaret looked between her parents. Mother, what do you mean? But Caroline wasn't listening to Margaret anymore. She was looking at Evelyn, really looking at her for the first time in months, and her smile was cold. When do you leave? She asked. Evelyn's voice came out rougher than she intended. Don't I get a say in this? A say? Walter folded the letter and tucked it into his vest pocket. Evelyn, the man is offering enough money to expand our operations into the Eastern Valley. Do you have any idea what that means? This family's influence would triple. So I'm for sale. You're being dramatic, Caroline said sharply. This is how marriage works, dear. Your father and I were arranged. Margaret and William were introduced by their families. This is no different. Except Margaret loves William. Margaret knows her duty, Caroline corrected, which is more than I can say for you most days. The words hung in the air like smoke. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Sarah studied her hands. Walter was already moving toward his study, probably to draft a response accepting the proposal. When? Evelyn asked again. Her voice was flat now, empty. When do I leave? 2 weeks, Walter called over his shoulder. Mercer wants the wedding before the first snow. His men will come to escort you up the mountain. Then he was gone. Caroline followed him, probably to start planning how to spend the bride price. Margaret stood, smoothed her dress again, and paused beside Evelyn on her way out. I'm sorry, she said quietly, but Father's right. It's good for the family. Good for the family, Evelyn repeated. Margaret couldn't meet her eyes. You'll be fine. I'm sure Mr. Mercer he must be a reasonable man. She left. Sarah lingered a moment longer, opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then thought better of it and followed her sister. Evelyn stood alone in the sitting room as the sun moved across the floor and the shadows lengthened. She didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that crying in the Grayson house was just giving people ammunition. Instead, she walked outside, past the manicured gardens her mother was so proud of, past the stables where the thoroughbreds Margaret liked to ride were kept, all the way to the back fence where the cattle grazed. Old Thomas was still there, hammering posts into the hard ground. He looked up when she approached, took one look at her face, and set down his hammer. Bad news? Evelyn sat on the fence rail. I'm getting married. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Congratulations? To a stranger. In 2 weeks. Ah. He picked up his hammer again, but he didn't swing it. Anyone I know? Caleb Mercer. The hammer slipped from Thomas's fingers and landed in the dirt. Christ almighty, he breathed. Then he caught himself and looked at her sharply. He asked for you specifically? Apparently. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then he bent down, retrieved his hammer, and went back to work. But his movements were slower now, thoughtful. That's interesting, he said finally. Interesting. The man's probably insane, or blind, or both. Caleb Mercer's a lot of things, but he ain't insane. Thomas drove a nail home with 3 solid strikes. Known him since he was a boy. His father and I used to trade horses before the old man passed. Caleb took over the ranch when he was barely 20, turned it into something bigger than his daddy ever dreamed. So he's ruthless. He's smart and careful. Doesn't make decisions without thinking them through. Thomas paused, leaning on the fence post. If he asked for you specific, he had a reason. What reason? He's never even met me. You sure about that? Evelyn frowned. I think I'd remember meeting the legendary Caleb Mercer. Maybe you weren't paying attention to who was watching. Thomas went back to his hammering. Either way, girl, I'll tell you this. You could do a hell of a lot worse than Caleb Mercer. Worse than being sold off like livestock. Worse than staying here, Thomas said quietly. The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. She looked back toward the house, where she could see her mother through the window, probably already writing letters to their social circle about the advantageous marriage arrangement, where Margaret was likely trying on different dresses to see which would look best at Evelyn's wedding, where her father was counting money he didn't have yet. Yeah, she said finally, I guess you're right about that. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bedroom, the smallest of the three daughters' rooms, the one with the window that stuck and the door that didn't quite close right, and stared at the ceiling. Downstairs she could hear voices. Her parents were still up, talking in the study. She shouldn't eavesdrop, she knew that, but something made her get out of bed, pull on her robe, and creep to the top of the stairs. Absolute stroke of luck, her father was saying. His voice carried easily in the quiet house. I thought we'd be stuck with her until we died. Evelyn froze. Walter, honestly. Caroline's laugh was soft, conspiratorial. The poor man has no idea what he's asking for. His funeral, or wedding, I suppose. Same thing in this case. They both laughed at that. Evelyn's hand gripped the banister hard enough that her knuckles went white. Do you think we should warn him, Caroline asked, about her temperament? And risk him changing his mind? Absolutely not. Once she's up that mountain, she's his problem. The stubborn streak alone, not to mention the way she argues with everyone. The inappropriate friendships with the help. That business last month when she embarrassed Councilman Porter in front of half the town. Don't remind me. I'm still getting looks at church. Well, Mercer can deal with all of that now. I just hope he doesn't send her back. He won't, Walter said confidently. Pride won't let him. A man like that asking for a specific bride? He'd rather suffer through than admit he made a mistake. More laughter, the clink of glasses. They were toasting getting rid of her. Evelyn turned and walked back to her room, very slowly, very carefully, like she was made of glass that might shatter. She closed the door, sat on the bed, stared at the wall. She'd always known her family didn't understand her, that they were embarrassed by the way she spoke her mind, the way she couldn't just smile and nod when people said things that were wrong, the way she'd rather fix a fence than practice piano, rather read legal documents than romance novels, rather defend old Thomas when Councilman Porter tried to cheat him out of wages than keep quiet and preserve the family's social standing. But she'd told herself they still loved her, deep down, in their own way. Now she knew better. They were celebrating, actually celebrating the fact that a stranger was taking her off their hands. Something inside Evelyn's chest cracked open. Not breaking, reshaping. She stood up and walked to her small closet, opened it, looked at the two good dresses her mother had insisted she own, both of which she hated, the simple work clothes she actually wore, the coat her father had bought her 3 Christmases ago that was already getting too small because nobody had noticed she'd grown. 2 weeks, her father had said. 2 weeks until she left this house forever. 2 weeks until she became Caleb Mercer's problem. Evelyn pulled out her oldest work dress, the one with the patched elbow and the hem she'd let out herself. She laid it on the bed and smoothed it flat. If they wanted to be rid of her so badly, fine. She'd go. She'd marry this mountain man who was apparently fool enough to want her. But she wasn't going to pretend to be something she wasn't. She wasn't going to show up in silk and pearls and play the delicate bride. She wasn't going to lie about who she was just to make this easier for everyone. If Caleb Mercer wanted Evelyn Grayson, he was going to get the real one, the stubborn one, the inappropriate one, the one who embarrassed her family and argued with councilmen and fixed fences with dirty hands. And if that made him regret his proposal, good. She was done caring what people thought they wanted from her. For the first time in hours, Evelyn smiled. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur. Her mother threw herself into wedding preparations with the kind of energy she usually reserved for Margaret's social events. She ordered a dress, white silk with lace overlay, completely impractical, and nothing Evelyn would have chosen. She planned a small ceremony at the local church, invited exactly enough people to be respectable, but not so many that anyone might look too closely at the bride's lack of enthusiasm. Evelyn wasn't consulted about any of it. She spent her days helping Thomas with the ranch work, much to her mother's fury. She came to meals with dirt under her nails and hay in her hair. She refused to practice her penmanship, or her posture, or her pleasant conversation skills. "You're going to embarrass us right up until the moment you leave, aren't you?" Caroline asked one evening, her voice tight with anger. "I'm just being myself," Evelyn said. That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Margaret tried in her way to be kind. She invited Evelyn to her room one night, tried to teach her how to arrange her hair in a more flattering style, how to smile in a way that seemed demure instead of challenging. "When you meet Mr. Mercer," Margaret said, carefully pinning Evelyn's hair, "you should let him lead the conversation. Men like to feel in control." What if he's wrong about something? Then you smile and change the subject. That sounds exhausting. Margaret's hands stilled. Marriage is exhausting, Evelyn, but it's our duty. Is that what William tells you? William is wonderful, Margaret said, but her voice had gone flat. We're going to be very happy. Evelyn looked at her sister in the mirror, really looked at her, at the perfect hair and the perfect dress and the perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. Are you happy now? Evelyn asked quietly. Margaret didn't answer for a long time. Then she pulled the last pin from Evelyn's hair and let it fall. It doesn't matter if I am, she said finally. This is what we do. This is who we are. Not me. No, Margaret agreed softly. Not you. She left Evelyn sitting at the vanity, hair loose around her shoulders, staring at her own reflection and wondering who would be looking back at her in 2 weeks' time. On the last day, Walter called Evelyn into his study. She'd been in this room exactly 3 times in her life. Once when she was 7 and had tracked mud through the house. Once when she was 12 and had been caught teaching the stable boy to read. Once when she was 15 and had publicly called out Councilman Porter for underpaying his workers. Each time had ended with a lecture about propriety and family reputation. This time, Walter didn't lecture. He sat behind his desk, hands folded, and studied her like she was a horse he was considering selling. The men from Mercer Ranch will be here tomorrow morning, he said. They'll escort you north. The journey takes 3 days. I know. You'll be married as soon as you arrive. Mr. Mercer wants the ceremony done before the weather turns. I know. Walter's jaw tightened. Are you going to fight me on this, Evelyn? Because if you are, I should tell you now. I'm not fighting, Evelyn interrupted. I'm going. Isn't that what you want? He blinked, clearly surprised. I want you to understand this is an incredible opportunity. Most women would be grateful. I'm not most women. No, Walter agreed. You're certainly not. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Evelyn could hear the ranch hands bringing the horses in for the evening. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds, the kind of sounds she wouldn't hear after tomorrow. Is there anything you want to tell me? Walter asked finally. Before you go? Evelyn looked at her father, at the man who'd heard her defend old Thomas against corruption and been embarrassed instead of proud, the man who'd heard she was being sold off to a stranger and started counting his money. No, she said, there's nothing. She stood and walked to the door. Evelyn. She paused but didn't turn around. Try not to disappoint him, Walter said. This family's reputation depends on it. Evelyn's hand tightened on the doorknob. I'll do my best. She left before he could see her face. That night, Caroline insisted they have a family dinner. One last evening together, she said, as if Evelyn were dying instead of just leaving. The cook prepared roasted chicken and potatoes. Margaret wore her second-best dress. Sarah actually brushed her hair. Walter sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his domain. Evelyn wore her work clothes. Nobody commented. They'd given up by now. The conversation flowed around her like water around a stone. Margaret talked about William's family estate. Sarah discussed a new riding horse their father was buying. Caroline mentioned a social event next month that Evelyn wouldn't be attending. Nobody asked Evelyn about the wedding. Nobody asked if she was nervous or excited or terrified. Nobody asked what she thought about marrying a man she'd never met and moving to a ranch 3 days' ride away. Nobody asked because nobody cared. Halfway through the meal, Evelyn set down her fork. I need to say something. The conversation stopped. Everyone looked at her. I know what you think of me, she said. Her voice was steady, calm. I've always known. I'm not stupid. Evelyn, Caroline started. I know I embarrass you. I know you think I'm difficult and stubborn and inappropriate. I know you're relieved I'm leaving. Silence. Margaret stared at her plate. Sarah's face had gone red. Walter's expression was carefully blank. But I want you to know something. Evelyn looked at each of them in turn. When I leave tomorrow, I'm not going because you want me to. I'm going because there's nothing for me here. There never was. That's not fair, Margaret said quietly. Isn't it? Evelyn turned to her sister. When was the last time anyone in this family asked what I wanted, what I thought, what I dreamed about? No one answered. That's what I thought. Evelyn stood. Thank you for dinner. It was lovely. She walked out. Behind her, she heard Caroline's voice, sharp and angry. "Walter, are you going to just let her—" "Let her go," Walter said wearily. "She'll be someone else's problem tomorrow." Evelyn climbed the stairs to her room for the last time. She didn't pack much. One bag with her work clothes, her books, her mother's old pocket watch that she'd claimed as a child and that Caroline had never bothered to take back. Everything else, the silk dresses, the jewelry, the useless decorative things, she left. She sat on her bed and watched the moon rise through her stuck window. Tomorrow, she would leave this house, this family, this life. Tomorrow, she would ride north into the mountains with strangers, to marry a man who apparently thought he wanted her. He had no idea what he was getting. And despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the bone-deep exhaustion of being unwanted for so long, Evelyn felt something unexpected. Hope. Maybe Caleb Mercer would be terrible. Maybe he'd be worse than her family. Maybe this would be the biggest mistake of her life. But maybe, just maybe, he'd meant what he wrote in that letter. Maybe he actually wanted her, not a Grayson daughter, not a pretty face or a social connection or someone to show off at parties. Her. And if he did? If this mountain stranger actually saw something in her worth wanting, then her family was right to celebrate getting rid of her. Because she was going to become something they couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't diminish. She was going to become free. The sun rose cold and clear. Evelyn woke before dawn, dressed in her plainest work dress and her sturdiest boots. She braided her hair herself, tight and practical. She looked in the mirror one last time and barely recognized the person looking back. Not because she'd changed, because for the first time in her life, she looked exactly like herself. Downstairs, she could hear movement, voices, horses in the yard. The Mercer men had arrived. Evelyn picked up her bag and walked downstairs. The family was gathered in the front hall, Caroline in her dressing gown, hair still in curl papers. Walter already dressed, checking his pocket watch. Margaret and Sarah standing together, whispering. They all looked up when Evelyn appeared. Caroline's face went pale. "You can't wear that." "It's what I'm comfortable in." "Evelyn, there are men from the Mercer Ranch waiting outside. Important men. You're representing this family?" "No," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm not. Not anymore." She walked past her mother, past her sisters, past her father standing in the doorway. Outside, 3 men sat on horses. She walked away from the only family she had ever known. But tell me honestly, was Evelyn brave or dangerously reckless? And while Evelyn rode toward an uncertain future, she had no idea the mountain man waiting for her had already been watching her for years. They were rough-looking, weathered by mountain winters and hard work. The kind of men who knew how to survive in the wilderness. The kind of men who looked at Evelyn's work dress and dirt-scuffed boots and didn't even blink. The oldest one, gray-haired, scarred across one cheek, tipped his hat. "Miss Grayson?" "That's me. I'm James. This is Tom and Charlie. We're here to escort you to Mercer Ranch." "I'm ready." James gestured to a 4th horse, already saddled. "Whenever you are, ma'am." Evelyn turned back one last time. Her family stood in the doorway. Margaret had tears in her eyes. Sarah was biting her lip. Caroline looked furious. Walter looked relieved. None of them said goodbye. Evelyn swung up into the saddle like she'd been doing it her whole life, because she had. She settled her bag behind her and gathered the reins. "Let's go," she said. And they rode north, toward the mountains, toward a future nobody could have predicted. Behind them, the Grayson family watched until the riders disappeared over the first hill. Then Walter closed the door, and that was that. 3 days through autumn, cold, and mountain passes. 3 days of riding through country that got rougher with every mile. 3 days of sleeping on hard ground under stars so bright they looked like ice chips scattered across black velvet. James and his men treated Evelyn with careful respect. They offered to carry her bag. She refused. They tried to give her the warmest spot by the fire. She told them to stop being ridiculous and share equally. By the second day, they'd stopped treating her like fragile cargo and started treating her like one of them. "You ride well," Tom commented on the evening of the second day. "I grew up on a ranch." "Rich ranch," Charlie added. "We heard the Grayson place was fancy." "Fancy doesn't mean much when you're out fixing fence posts," James chuckled. "Mr. Mercer said you weren't like the others." Evelyn looked up sharply. "He said that?" "Said you were different. Said that's why he asked for you." "Different how?" James just smiled and went back to checking the horses. They reached Mercer Ranch on the third afternoon. Evelyn saw it from miles away, a massive compound built into the side of the mountain, protected on three sides by rock face and on the fourth by a cleared field that gave a perfect view of anyone approaching. The main house was timber and stone, built to withstand anything the mountains could throw at it. Barns and outbuildings clustered around it like chicks around a hen. It was impressive in a way that had nothing to do with decoration and everything to do with survival. As they rode closer, Evelyn could see people working, ranch hands mending fences, women tending gardens, children running errands. Everyone moved with purpose. No one was idle. "It's bigger than I expected," she said. "Wait till you see the inside," Tom said. "Mr. Mercer don't do nothing halfway." They rode through the main gate. Workers looked up, some nodding to James and his men, others staring openly at Evelyn. She could feel them assessing her, judging. Let them look, she thought. Let them see exactly who they're getting. James led them to the main house and dismounted. "Wait here. I'll tell Mr. Mercer you've arrived." He disappeared inside. Evelyn sat on her horse, very still, very calm. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This was it. No going back now. The door opened. A man stepped out. Evelyn had tried to imagine what Caleb Mercer would look like. Tried to picture the legendary mountain rancher, the man who'd built an empire in the wilderness, the stranger who'd asked for her hand without ever meeting her. She'd imagined someone older, harder, colder. The man walking toward her was none of those things. He was tall, taller than her father, taller than anyone she'd ever met, broad-shouldered from years of physical work, dark hair, dark eyes, a face that looked like it had been carved from the mountain stone itself. He had scars, one across his jaw, another disappearing into his hairline, and his hands were calloused and rough. But his eyes were kind. He stopped a few feet from her horse and looked up at her. Really looked at her, like he was seeing something no one else had ever bothered to notice. "Evelyn Grayson," he said. His voice was deep, quiet. "Welcome home." Evelyn didn't move from the saddle. She sat there, staring down at Caleb Mercer, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. "Home," she repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth. "If you want it to be." He stepped back and gestured toward the house. "You've had a long ride. Come inside. We can talk." She dismounted without his help, landing hard enough that her boots kicked up dust. Tom reached for her bag, but she grabbed it first. "I've got it." Caleb's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "James, see to the horses. Make sure they're fed and watered." "Yes, sir." Evelyn followed Caleb toward the house, acutely aware of all the eyes on her. A woman hanging laundry. Two men repairing a wagon wheel. A girl who couldn't have been more than 10 carrying a bucket of water. They all stopped to watch. Inside, the house was nothing like her father's estate. No fancy wallpaper or imported furniture. Everything was wood, rough-hewn beams overhead, plank floors worn smooth by years of use. But it was clean, solid, the kind of place built to last through anything. Caleb led her to a large room that looked like it served as both kitchen and gathering space. A fire burned in a massive stone hearth. The table was scarred oak, big enough to seat 20. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books. Books. Not decorative volumes chosen to look impressive. Actual books with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. "Sit," Caleb said, pulling out a chair. "Are you hungry?" "I'm fine." "You just rode 3 days. You're hungry." He moved to the stove without waiting for her answer, and Evelyn found herself sitting at the table, watching this man who was supposed to be her husband ladle soup into a bowl. He set it in front of her along with bread that looked fresh. Then he poured coffee, black, strong, the kind ranch hands drank at dawn. "Eat," he said, sitting across from her. "Then we'll talk." Evelyn picked up the spoon. The soup was good, venison and vegetables, seasoned with herbs she didn't recognize. She ate slowly, deliberately, refusing to let him see how hungry she actually was. Caleb watched her. Not in the way men sometimes watched women, assessing, judging, comparing. He just looked at her like he was trying to figure something out. Finally, Evelyn set down her spoon. "Why me?" "Direct. I like that. I don't care what you like. I want to know why you asked for me specifically. You've never met me. You don't know anything about me except what my father told you in letters, and I guarantee he lied about half of it. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Your father didn't tell me much at all, just confirmed you were unmarried and of age. Then how? I've seen you before. Evelyn's stomach tightened. When? 3 years ago. I was in Red Hollow selling horses. There was a scene in the town square, a merchant trying to cheat an old man out of wages. Everyone was standing around watching, doing nothing. The memory hit her like cold water. She remembered that day. Councilman Porter's brother-in-law, claiming old Samuel hadn't completed work that everyone knew he had. Samuel standing there with his hat in his hands, too scared to argue. You stepped in, Caleb continued, told the merchant exactly what he was and exactly what you thought of men who stole from people who couldn't fight back. You made him pay Samuel in front of everyone. He called me hysterical. He called you worse than that. But you didn't back down. You stood there until he counted out every coin he owed. Evelyn looked down at her hands. My mother didn't speak to me for a week after that. Said I'd embarrassed the family. I thought you were magnificent. Her head snapped up. Caleb's expression hadn't changed, still calm, still watching her with those dark eyes. But there was something in his voice that made her chest feel tight. You thought I was crazy, she said. No, I thought you were brave. He paused. I asked around about you after that. Found out you were Walter Grayson's daughter. Found out you had a reputation for speaking your mind and defending people who couldn't defend themselves. Found out your family thought you were difficult. I am difficult. Good. The word hung between them. Evelyn shook her head slowly. You don't mean that. Nobody wants difficult. I do. Caleb leaned forward, forearms on the table. I've met plenty of beautiful women, quiet women, obedient women who smile and nod and never say what they actually think. I could have married any one of them. He held her gaze. I didn't want any of them. I wanted you. Why? Because up here in these mountains, pretty manners don't mean shit. Survival means telling the truth even when it's hard. It means standing up for what's right even when everyone else is standing down. It means having the courage to be exactly who you are. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at his ranch. I need a partner, Evelyn. Not a decoration. Not someone who'll smile and keep quiet while the world goes to hell. I need someone strong enough to build something that lasts. Evelyn's throat felt tight. You don't know me. Not really. I could be. You could be exactly who you've always been. He turned back to her. And that's all I'm asking for. She didn't know what to say to that. For 3 years, her family had told her everything she was wrong. And now this stranger, this mountain rancher who barely knew her, was saying it was exactly right. I should warn you, she said finally, I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not going to smile when I'm angry or keep quiet when something's wrong. I'm not going to be easy to live with. Good thing I'm not easy to live with either. I'm serious. So am I. Caleb crossed his arms. I'm asking you to marry me, Evelyn. But I'm not going to force you. You've got a choice here. She laughed, sharp, disbelieving. What choice? I'm already here. The arrangement's been made. The bride price is probably already spent. I haven't paid it yet. That stopped her cold. What? I told your father I'd send the money after the wedding. That was a lie. I'm not sending him a damn thing. Caleb's jaw tightened. I heard what your family thinks of you. I know they're celebrating getting rid of you, and I'll be damned if I give that man 1 cent for treating his daughter like livestock. Evelyn stared at him. He'll be furious. He can be furious on his own ranch. He's got no power up here. But the agreement was that I'd marry a Grayson daughter. It didn't specify what happens after that. Caleb moved back to the table and sat down. Here's what I'm offering. Stay here for a month. No obligations. Learn about the ranch. Learn about me. If at the end of that month you want to leave, I'll give you money and a horse, and you can go anywhere you want. Start over somewhere fresh. And if I stay, then we get married. We build this place together. We make it into something neither of us could make alone. It was too good, too easy. There had to be something wrong with it. Why would you do that? Evelyn asked. Why give me a choice when you've already gone through all this trouble? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. My mother didn't have a choice. My father was a good man, but he bought her from a family that wanted her gone. just like yours wants you gone. She spent 20 years on this mountain wishing she was somewhere else. I watched her fade a little more every year. He looked up, and there was old pain in his eyes. I won't do that to someone else. Not even for a woman I've waited 3 years to ask for. The honesty of it hit Evelyn like a fist to the chest. She'd expected threats or manipulation, or at least some kind of pressure. Instead, this man was offering her freedom, actual, real freedom to choose her own future. 1 month, she said slowly. 1 month. And you won't... She stopped, not sure how to ask. I won't touch you, Caleb said bluntly. There's a room upstairs you can have, door locks from the inside. You'll be safe here, Evelyn. I give you my word. She wanted to believe him. The wanting was so strong it scared her. Okay, she heard herself say. 1 month. Caleb nodded once, stood, and held out his hand. Then let me show you around. The ranch was bigger than Evelyn had realized. Caleb walked her through it as the afternoon sun slanted long across the valley, past the barns where horses stamped and snorted, past the cattle pens where hundreds of head grazed on mountain grass, past the workers' cabins and the storage buildings and the smithy where a man was hammering out horseshoes. Everyone they passed nodded to Caleb with respect that looked genuine. Not the kind of deference her father demanded, born of fear and social hierarchy. This was different. These people trusted him. How many people work here? Evelyn asked. About 40 year-round, more during roundup and branding. Caleb paused to let her catch up. The altitude was higher here than she was used to, and her lungs were working harder. Most of them live on the property. Families, single men, few widows who cook and mend. You feed all of them? And pay them fair wages. Anyone who works hard has a place here. They climbed a rise that overlooked the entire compound. From here, Evelyn could see the full scope of what Caleb had built. It wasn't just a ranch. It was a community. A small town unto itself, functioning and thriving in the middle of nowhere. Your father built this? She asked. Started it. I finished it after he died. Caleb's voice went flat. He was a hard man. Good at ranching, bad at everything else. When I took over, half the hands quit because they couldn't believe I'd actually pay them what they were worth. How old were you? 21. Jesus, 21 years old and running an operation this size. Evelyn looked at him with new eyes. That must have been hard. Hard doesn't begin to cover it. First winter, I lost 30 head of cattle because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Second year, had a fire that took out 2 barns. Third year, he stopped, jaw tight. Third year, my mother died, and I realized I was completely alone up here. I'm sorry. Don't be. I survived it, learned from it, built something better. He turned to face her fully. That's what I want you to understand, Evelyn. Nothing about this place came easy. Everything you see, someone fought for, and it's not finished. It'll never be finished. There's always something breaking, always someone needing help, always another problem to solve. You're trying to scare me off. I'm trying to be honest. This isn't a fairy tale. This is hard work and long winters, and sometimes people die because the doctor's 3 days away and the snow's too deep to ride through. His eyes searched hers. I need you to know what you'd be choosing if you stayed. Evelyn looked out at the ranch again, at the mountains rising behind it, sharp and unforgiving, at the valley stretching ahead, wild and beautiful, at the people moving through their evening tasks, everyone working together toward something bigger than themselves. It should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. Show me more, she said. They walked until the sun touched the mountain peaks and the air went cold. Caleb showed her the gardens where they grew vegetables, the root cellar where they stored food for winter, the workshop where a carpenter was building new furniture. He introduced her to people. James the foreman, Hannah, who ran the kitchens, Thomas the blacksmith, who shared a name with old Thomas back home. Nobody stared at her work dress or her dirty boots. Nobody seemed surprised that she asked questions or wanted to know how things worked. She always this curious? Hannah asked Caleb after Evelyn had spent 20 minutes asking about food preservation. I hope so, he said. As they walked back toward the main house, a woman intercepted them. She was younger than Evelyn, maybe 20, with red hair and a face full of freckles. Mr. Mercer, sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation with the Hendersons. Caleb's expression shifted instantly. What kind of situation? Baby's coming early, real early. Martha's with them now, but she's worried. How early? 2 months, maybe more. Caleb swore under his breath. Get my horse ready. I'm riding to town for the doctor. Already sent Charlie an hour ago. Figured you'd want him fetched. Good thinking, Anne. He turned to Evelyn. I need to go check on them. You can head back to the house. I'm coming with you. He paused. It's not going to be pleasant. I didn't ask if it would be pleasant. I said, I'm coming. Something flickered across his face. Approval, maybe, or relief. All right, keep up. They walked fast across the compound to a small cabin set slightly apart from the others. Light glowed through the windows. Inside, Evelyn could hear a woman crying. Caleb knocked once and pushed the door open. The cabin was tiny. One room with a bed, a table, a stove. A young couple lived here, clearly. The man, maybe 30, work-roughened and scared, stood by the bed where his wife lay curled on her side, face streaked with tears. An older woman knelt beside the bed, checking the pregnant woman's pulse. She looked up when Caleb entered, and her expression was grim. How is she, Martha? Contractions started this afternoon. They're not stopping. Martha stood, wiping her hands on her apron. Baby's too early, even if the doctor gets here in time. He'll get here. Caleb's voice was firm, absolute. Charlie's the fastest rider we have. The husband, Henderson, grabbed Caleb's arm. She's going to be all right, isn't she? Tell me she's going to be all right. We're going to do everything we can. It wasn't a promise. It was the truth. Henderson seemed to understand that because he let go and stepped back, running shaking hands through his hair. Evelyn moved to the bed without thinking about it. The woman, Sarah, she heard someone call her, looked up with fear-glazed eyes. Hey, Evelyn said quietly. I'm Evelyn. It's too early, Sarah whispered. The baby, it's too early. I know, but you're strong, and help is coming. Evelyn took the woman's hand. It was cold, trembling. Have you been drinking water? Sarah shook her head. Martha, can you get her some water? And more blankets. She's freezing. Martha moved immediately, and Evelyn was dimly aware of Caleb watching her from across the room. For the next hour, they waited. Evelyn stayed by Sarah's side, holding her hand through contractions, wiping sweat from her face, talking to her in a low, steady voice about nothing and everything. The garden she'd seen. The mountains. Anything to keep Sarah focused on something other than the pain. Henderson paced. Martha prepared supplies they might need. Caleb stood by the window, watching the road. Finally, hoofbeats. Charlie burst through the door, followed by a gray-haired man carrying a medical bag. Where is she? The doctor took over, and Evelyn stepped back to give him room. She found herself standing next to Caleb, both of them watching the doctor examine Sarah. You're good at that, Caleb said quietly. At what? Staying calm when everything's falling apart. I'm terrified. I know, but you don't show it. That matters. The doctor worked through the night. Evelyn and Caleb stayed along with Martha and Henderson. Nobody slept. They just waited, listening to Sarah cry and the doctor murmur instructions and the wind howl outside like something alive. Just before dawn, a baby cried. It was thin and weak, but it was alive. Henderson started crying. Martha crossed herself. The doctor worked fast, cleaning the baby, checking for breathing problems, wrapping the tiny thing in blankets. Boy, he announced. Small, but fighting. He's got a chance. Sarah sobbed with relief, reaching for her son. The doctor placed the baby in her arms, still working, still worried, but the worst had passed. They'd made it through. Evelyn walked outside because her legs were shaking and she needed air. The sun was just breaking over the mountains, turning the valley gold. She stood there breathing hard, feeling like she'd just survived something even though she hadn't done anything important. The door opened behind her. Caleb. You all right? Is she going to be okay? Really? Doctor says the next few days will tell, but she's got a better chance than she did yesterday. He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cold morning air. You helped with that, keeping her calm, keeping Henderson from falling apart. That mattered. I just held her hand. Sometimes that's everything. They stood in silence, watching the sun rise. This is what it's like here? Evelyn asked finally. This is normal? This is life. People get hurt, babies come early, things go wrong. All you can do is show up, and try to help. And if it's not enough, then you try again tomorrow. Evelyn thought about her family back in Red Hollow, about her mother's carefully controlled parlor where nothing messy was ever allowed, about her father's study where problems were solved with money and influence, never by actually getting your hands dirty. They would never survive up here, but she could. She knew that suddenly, with absolute certainty. This place with its hard truths and harder work, this was somewhere she could actually belong. "Come on," Caleb said. "You've been up all night. You need sleep." He was right. Now that the crisis had passed, exhaustion hit her like a wave. She could barely walk back to the main house. Caleb showed her to a room on the second floor. It was simple: a bed, a chest of drawers, a window that looked out over the valley. Someone had already brought her bag up. "Lock the door," he reminded her. "Sleep as long as you need." He started to leave. "Caleb?" He turned back. "Thank you," Evelyn said, "for letting me help, for not treating me like I'd break." "You're not going to break." He said it like it was fact, not opinion. "Get some rest, Evelyn." She locked the door after he left, then collapsed on the bed without bothering to change clothes. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. She woke to afternoon light and the smell of food. Someone had left a tray outside her door. Bread, cheese, cold chicken, water. She ate sitting on the bed, looking out the window at the ranch below. People were working. Life had continued while she slept. The world hadn't stopped because she was tired. There was something comforting about that. After eating, Evelyn found a washroom down the hall with a pump and basin. She cleaned up as best she could, changed into fresh clothes, and braided her hair. Then she went downstairs. The main room was empty except for Hannah, who was kneading bread at the big table. "There you are," Hannah said. "Feeling better?" "Yes, thank you for the food." "Wasn't me. Mr. Mercer brought it up before he rode out." "Rode out where?" "Henderson Place. Baby took a turn this morning. Nothing serious, just needed watching. He's been there most of the day." Hannah punched down the dough. "Man takes care of his people. Always has." Evelyn sat at the table, watching Hannah work. "How long have you been here?" 12 years. Came up here after my husband died. Caleb's father gave me work in the kitchens when nobody else would hire a widow with 3 kids to feed." "Where are your kids now?" "2 of them work the ranch. Daughter's married to the blacksmith. They've got a baby on the way." Hannah smiled. "This place saved us. Gave us a future when we didn't have one." "Caleb did that?" "His father started it, but Caleb made it better. The old man was fair, but he was cold. Caleb's different. He actually gives a damn about people." Evelyn absorbed that. "Can I help with anything?" Hannah looked her over. "You know how to cook?" "Some. My mother didn't think it was appropriate for a lady to spend time in the kitchen, but I learned anyway." "Good. Because we've got 40 people to feed for dinner, and I could use another pair of hands." They worked side by side for the next few hours, and Evelyn found it surprisingly easy. Hannah didn't treat her like a guest or a future wife of the boss. She just treated her like someone who could be useful. By the time the dinner bell rang, they'd prepared enough stew to feed an army. Workers filed in, filling the long tables. They were loud, tired, hungry. They joked and argued and told stories while they ate. Nobody stood on ceremony. Nobody cared about propriety. It was nothing like the silent, formal dinners at the Grayson house. Evelyn loved it. She was helping clean up when Caleb finally returned. He looked exhausted, but his expression lightened when he saw her. "You're up." "Hannah put me to work." "And she did fine," Hannah added, not looking up from the pot she was scrubbing. "Girl knows her way around a kitchen." "Baby?" Evelyn asked. "Still fighting. Sarah's doing better. They're going to make it." Caleb grabbed a bowl and filled it from the remaining stew. "Thanks for this, Hannah." "Thank Evelyn. She did half of it." He looked at Evelyn over the bowl, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "You want to take a walk?" he asked. "After you're done here?" "Give me 10 minutes." They walked through the compound as the sun set, painting everything orange and red. The temperature was dropping fast, and Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. Caleb noticed. He shrugged out of his coat and held it out. "I'm fine." "You're freezing. Take it." She took it. The coat was still warm from his body, and it smelled like leather and wood smoke. They ended up at the same overlook from earlier, watching the valley disappear into shadow. "What do you think?" Caleb asked. After a full day here? I think it's not what I expected. Better or worse? Different. Evelyn pulled the coat tighter. My whole life I was told I needed to be quieter, softer, more agreeable, that the way I was would never be useful to anyone. And now I spent the night helping a woman through labor and the afternoon cooking for 40 people, and nobody once told me I was doing it wrong. She looked at him. You really mean it, don't you? When you say you need a partner, not a decoration. Every word? Because this place, these people, they need real help, not someone who looks pretty at parties. Exactly. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't? You sat with Sarah Henderson through the worst night of her life and gave her courage when she had none left, Caleb interrupted. You helped Hannah feed an entire ranch without being asked. You rode 3 days through mountain country without complaining once. He turned to face her fully. You're already good enough, Evelyn. You've always been good enough. Your family was just too stupid to see it. The words cracked something open inside her chest. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to be honest. All right. If this doesn't work, if I stay the month and we get married and then it all falls apart, what happens to me? Caleb's jaw tightened. That won't happen. But if it does, then you'd still have a home here, still have work if you wanted it, still have a horse and money to leave if that's what you chose. He held her gaze. I'm not your father, Evelyn. I won't throw you away just because things get hard. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She actually believed him. 1 month, she said again. 1 month, and then you decide. They stood there as full dark fell and stars appeared overhead, bright and cold and impossibly numerous. Evelyn had never seen so many stars. In Red Hollow, there were buildings and streetlights and smoke from chimneys that blocked them out. Here, there was nothing between her and the sky. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Wait until winter. When it's really clear, you can see the whole universe. I might like to see that. Then stay, Caleb said. Simple as that. Stay and build something with me. Something that matters. Evelyn didn't answer. She just stood there, wrapped in his coat, breathing cold air and watching stars, and let herself imagine a future where she wasn't trying to be someone else, where being exactly who she was might actually be enough. The days fell into a rhythm Evelyn hadn't expected. She woke before dawn with the rest of the ranch, ate breakfast in the big kitchen alongside workers who stopped seeing her as the boss's intended bride and started seeing her as just Evelyn. She worked, actually worked, with her hands in her back and sometimes until her muscles screamed. Hannah taught her to make bread that didn't turn out like rocks. Martha showed her how to treat minor injuries when the doctor was too far away to help. James let her ride out with him to check fence lines, and when she asked questions about the land and the cattle and how to read weather in the mountains, he answered like her curiosity was normal instead of inappropriate. Nobody told her to sit down. Nobody told her to be quiet. Nobody told her she was doing it wrong. Well, not exactly nobody. You're holding the hammer like you're afraid of it, Thomas the blacksmith said on her 5th day, watching her try to straighten a bent horseshoe. It's a tool, not a snake. I'm trying not to smash my fingers. You'll smash your fingers either way if you keep that up. Here. He adjusted her grip, his hands rough and patient. Firm but not tight. Let the weight of the hammer do the work. She tried again. The metal rang true this time. Better, Thomas grunted. You might be teachable after all. Evelyn grinned despite herself. High praise. Don't let it go to your head. She saw Caleb throughout the days, but always in passing. He was constantly moving, fixing something, checking on someone, solving whatever crisis had erupted that morning. Sometimes it was a broken wagon wheel. Sometimes it was a dispute between workers. Once it was a cow that had gotten stuck in a ravine and needed 3 men and a lot of rope to pull free. He never asked her to sit things out. If she was there when something needed doing, he handed her a rope or a tool and expected her to help. On the 8th day, a storm rolled in. Evelyn woke to thunder shaking the windows and rain coming down so hard it sounded like gravel hitting the roof. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find chaos. All hands! James was shouting to the workers crammed in the main room. Stock's spooked, and the south fence is down. We get them scattered in this weather. We'll lose half the herd. I'm going, Evelyn said. Hannah looked up from where she was preparing emergency supplies. Girl, you've never worked cattle in a storm. Then I'll learn fast. Caleb appeared in the doorway, already soaked through. His eyes found Evelyn immediately. You don't have to, but I'm going. Something flickered across his face. Get a coat. A real one, not those pretty things from your bag. Hannah, find her something waterproof. 10 minutes later, Evelyn was on a horse riding into hell. The rain was blinding. The wind tried to tear her from the saddle. Lightning split the sky close enough that she could smell the ozone. The cattle were panicking, running in every direction, their eyes rolling white with terror. Left flank! Caleb's voice cut through the storm. Turn them back toward the north pasture. Evelyn kicked her horse forward. She'd ridden her whole life, but never like this. Never in mud that sucked at the horse's hooves and rain that turned the world into a gray blur. She focused on the dark shapes of cattle, on the voices of other riders, on not getting thrown when her horse stumbled. A cow broke from the herd, running straight for the broken fence and the cliff beyond it. Evelyn didn't think. She just spurred her horse after it, leaning low, ignoring the branches that whipped her face. She got ahead of the cow and turned it back just as it reached the fence line. Good! James shouted from somewhere behind her. Keep them moving! They worked for hours, rounding up scattered cattle, repairing fence in the driving rain, counting and recounting to make sure they hadn't lost anyone. By the time the storm finally broke, Evelyn was soaked to the bone, covered in mud, and so exhausted she could barely stay in the saddle. But they'd saved the herd. All of it. Back at the compound, workers moved like ghosts, too tired to talk. Someone took Evelyn's horse. Someone else pushed a cup of something hot into her hands. She drank without tasting it. Caleb found her sitting on the porch steps, still in her wet clothes, staring at nothing. You all right? I think so. Her hands were shaking. Now that it was over, the fear was catching up. The cow almost went over the cliff, but it didn't, because you stopped it. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. He was as soaked and muddy as she was. You did good out there. I was terrified. Everyone was terrified. You just didn't let it stop you. They sat in silence, listening to water drip from the eaves. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, and the wet world sparkled. My mother would have fainted if she saw me right now, Evelyn said. My mother would have been proud. Evelyn looked at him. Really looked at him. At the exhaustion in his face, the scar on his jaw, the way he held himself like he was carrying weight no one else could see. You miss her, she said. Every day. His voice was rough. She never wanted this life. My father brought her up here right after they married, and she spent 20 years trying to make herself fit into something she never chose. I watched it wear her down, piece by piece. Is that why you gave me the choice? To stay or leave? Partly. But also because I watched what happened when two people try to build something together, and one of them doesn't want to be there. It doesn't work. It just makes everyone miserable. Your father loved her? In his way. But love isn't always enough if you can't see the person you're loving. Caleb stood, held out his hand. Come on. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia. She took his hand. Let him pull her up. They stood there for a moment, hands still clasped, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. 2 weeks, he said quietly. You've been here 2 weeks. How are you feeling about the other two? Evelyn's heart was pounding, and she wasn't sure if it was from the storm or from standing this close to him. Ask me again in 2 weeks, she said. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Fair enough. The next week brought different challenges. A sickness swept through the workers' children. Nothing deadly, but enough to leave half the mothers exhausted and desperate. Evelyn found herself in cabin after cabin, holding feverish kids while their parents slept, reading stories she made up because there weren't enough books to go around, making soup that most of them wouldn't eat but trying anyway. You're good with them, Anne said one evening. She was the red-headed woman who'd first told them about Sarah Henderson's baby. Her own daughter was recovering from the fever, finally sleeping peacefully. I'm making it up as I go. We all are. That's parenting. Anne sat down heavily in the chair beside the bed. Thank you for this, for helping. You didn't have to. Where else would I be? I don't know, back at the main house, doing whatever it is rich ladies do? Evelyn laughed, short and bitter. I was never very good at being a rich lady. You're good at this, though. Anne gestured around the small cabin. Being useful, giving a damn about people. That matters more than knowing which fork to use. My mother would disagree. Your mother's not here. The simple truth of that settled over Evelyn like a blanket. Her mother wasn't here. Her father wasn't here. Margaret and Sarah and the entire suffocating world of Red Hollow society wasn't here. It was just her. Just Evelyn, exactly as she was. And somehow, that was enough. On the 17th day, Caleb asked her to ride out with him to check on the Henderson place. The baby, they'd named him Jacob, had survived those critical first days. Now Sarah was recovering, and Henderson was trying to keep up with ranch work while taking care of both of them. He's struggling, Caleb said as they rode. Won't admit it, but I can see it. Pride's going to break him if someone doesn't step in. What are you going to do? Give him lighter duties for a while. Make sure they have enough food. Check on them regular. He glanced at her. Thought you might want to visit Sarah. She's been asking about you. They found the small cabin in better shape than the night Jacob was born. Someone had chopped wood and stacked it neatly. The garden had been weeded. Inside, Sarah was sitting up in bed with Jacob nursing, looking tired but alive. Evelyn! Her face lit up. I was hoping you'd come. Henderson stood quickly, offering his chair. Evelyn took it, leaning close to see the baby. He's bigger, she said. Doctor says he's gaining weight. Slow, but steady. Sarah adjusted the blanket around Jacob. I wanted to thank you for that night. I don't think I would have made it through without you. You would have. You're stronger than you think. Maybe, but having you there helped. Sarah looked up at Caleb, who was talking quietly with Henderson by the door. He's a good man, Mr. Mercer. Came by 3 times this week to check on us. Brought food, helped with chores. Most bosses wouldn't bother. He's not most bosses. You going to marry him? The question caught Evelyn off guard. I don't know yet. You should. Sarah shifted Jacob to her shoulder, patting his back. I know it's not my place to say, but I've lived on this ranch for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. How does he look at me? Like he's been waiting his whole life and finally found what he was looking for. Evelyn's throat went tight. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. Love usually is. They stayed for an hour. Evelyn helped Sarah with the baby, while Caleb and Henderson repaired a loose board on the porch. When they finally left, the sun was setting, painting the mountains purple and gold. Sarah looks good, Evelyn said as they rode. She's a fighter. They both are. Caleb was quiet for a moment. That's what it takes up here. People who don't give up when things get hard. Is that a test? To see if I'll give up? No, it's just the truth. He pulled his horse to a stop at the top of a ridge. The entire valley spread below them, the ranch building small in the distance. I need you to understand something, Evelyn. If you stay, if we do this, there are going to be nights like the one Jacob was born. Storms like the one last week. Sick kids and broken fences and problems I can't fix no matter how hard I try. I know. Do you? Because it's not romantic. It's not a story where everything works out clean and easy. It's messy and hard, and sometimes people you care about die anyway. Evelyn looked at him, at the pain in his eyes that spoke of losses she didn't know about yet. Why are you trying to scare me away? I'm not. I'm trying to make sure you know what you're choosing. He turned his horse to face hers. Because if you stay, I'm going to fall in love with you. Hell, I'm probably already halfway there. And if you leave after that, it's going to hurt worse than anything I've survived so far. The honesty of it stole her breath. You can't know that, she said. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you rode into a storm without hesitation. I know you sat with Sarah through the worst night of her life. I know you helped Hannah feed 40 people without being asked and learned to shoe horses from Thomas even though your hands were bleeding. I know you're exactly who you are. No pretending, no games. His voice dropped. That's all I need to know. Evelyn's heart was hammering against her ribs. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail? Then we fail together. But Evelyn, he urged his horse closer until they were knee to knee. I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to be magnificent. The word hit her like that day in the town square 3 years ago when he'd thought the same thing and she hadn't known anyone was watching. 1 week left, she whispered. 1 week. And then I need an answer. They rode back in silence as darkness fell and the first stars appeared. Evelyn's mind was racing, her heart pulling in directions she hadn't expected. Fear and hope tangled together until she couldn't tell them apart. Back at the ranch, she helped Hannah with dinner, then escaped to her room. She stood at the window looking out at the mountains that had seemed so threatening 3 weeks ago and now felt like protection, like walls keeping out the world that had never wanted her anyway. A knock on the door. "It's me," Caleb's voice. She opened it. He stood in the hallway holding something wrapped in cloth. "I made you something. Well, Thomas made it. I just designed it." He handed her the bundle. Inside was a knife in a leather sheath. The handle was carved wood, smooth and perfectly weighted. Her initials were burned into the leather. "Every person who works this ranch carries a knife," Caleb said. "For cutting rope, fixing tack, whatever needs doing. I figured if you're going to be here, you should have one too." "Caleb, it doesn't mean you have to stay. It just means while you're here, you're one of us, part of the ranch, not a guest." Evelyn pulled the knife free. The blade caught the lamplight, sharp and clean. It was beautiful in a practical way, a tool made with care. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and turned to leave. "Caleb, wait." He stopped. Evelyn didn't know what she was going to say until the words were out. "When you watched me in town that day, when I stood up to that merchant, what did you think, really?" He turned back slowly. "I thought you were the bravest person I'd ever seen. I thought the world needed more people willing to stand up when everyone else stayed sitting down. I thought—" He stopped, jaw working. "I thought if I ever found someone like you, I'd do whatever it took to keep them in my life. Even marry them without meeting them first? Especially that." They stood there in the doorway, 3 feet apart, and Evelyn felt the distance like a physical thing. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "That I'll stay and it won't work. That I'll mess it up somehow. That you'll realize your family was right about me being difficult and impossible and—" "Stop." Caleb closed the distance between them in 2 steps. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Your family was wrong about you. Wrong about everything that matters. You're not difficult. You're honest. You're not impossible. You're brave. And if anyone here ever makes you feel like those things are flaws instead of exactly what makes you valuable, you tell me, immediately. What if it's you? What if you're the one who makes me feel that way? Then you call me on it. You argue with me. You don't back down." His voice was fierce. "That's the deal, Evelyn. We're partners or we're nothing. I need you to believe that." She wanted to. The wanting was so strong it scared her. "Ask me in 6 days," she said. His mouth quirked. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Making me wait." "Maybe a little." "Fair enough." He stepped back and she felt the loss of his warmth. "Good night, Evelyn." "Good night." She closed the door and leaned against it, knife still in her hand, heart still racing. 6 days. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Evelyn was helping Martha prepare bandages when James came running into the main house. "Caleb, we've got riders coming in from the south. Look like trouble." Everyone moved at once. Caleb grabbed his rifle from above the door. Workers appeared from barns and cabins, armed and ready. This wasn't the first time strangers had shown up looking for a fight. But when the riders crested the hill, Evelyn's blood went cold. She recognized the lead horse, recognized the man riding it, her father. "Stay inside," Caleb said, but Evelyn was already moving toward the door. "That's my father." He looked at her sharply. "You sure? I'd know that bastard anywhere." Walter Grayson rode into the compound like he owned it, flanked by 4 hired guns who looked mean enough to earn their keep. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of the main house and dismounted, brushing dust from his coat like he was arriving at a social call. "Mr. Mercer, I presume?" he called out. Caleb walked down the porch steps, rifle held casual but ready. "Mr. Grayson, wasn't expecting you. I'm here to check on my daughter, make sure she arrived safely and is being treated well." "She's fine, you can leave now." Walter's smile was cold. "I think I'll see her first. Speak with her privately." "No." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Walter's expression hardened. "I have every right to see my own daughter." "You gave up that right when you sold her like livestock." Caleb's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. She's under my protection now. You don't get access unless she says so. Evelyn! Walter raised his voice, looking past Caleb toward the house. Evelyn, come out here. Evelyn stepped onto the porch. She felt every eye turn toward her, but she kept her focus on her father. I'm here, she said. What do you want? Walter's face shifted through several emotions, surprise, relief, then calculation. Sweetheart, I came all this way to make sure you're all right. Your mother has been worried sick. Mother hasn't worried about me a day in her life. Try again. His jaw tightened. Fine. We need to talk, privately. Anything you want to say, you can say in front of everyone here. This is family business. These people are more family than you ever were. Walter's mask slipped. The pretense of concerned father vanished, replaced by the cold businessman underneath. Very well, I'll be direct. I came here to discuss the terms of your marriage contract. Mr. Mercer and I need to finalize certain financial arrangements. There is no contract, Caleb said. We had an agreement. We had a letter. I asked to marry your daughter. I never agreed to pay you for the privilege. Walter went very still. You're refusing the bride price? I already refused it. Told you that in my response 3 weeks ago. That's unacceptable. We had a deal. The deal was I marry Evelyn. I'm prepared to do that if she agrees, but I'm not giving you a single cent. The hired guns shifted, hands moving toward weapons. James and the other ranch hands responded immediately, rifles coming up. The tension ratcheted so high Evelyn could taste it. You're making a mistake, Mercer, Walter said quietly. I have connections, influence. I could make things very difficult for you. You could try. Think carefully. You're isolated up here. Supply lines can be disrupted. Business relationships can sour. You need the valley ranchers to survive, and I have considerable sway over Sheshtin. No, you don't. Caleb's voice was flat, certain. You had influence once, when you had money and power. But I've been hearing things about investigations into your business practices, about debts you can't pay, about families pulling away from yours because the Grayson name doesn't mean what it used to. Walter's face had gone white. That's why you're really here, Caleb continued. Not to check on Evelyn, to try and salvage something from this arrangement. Maybe threaten me into paying what I never agreed to pay. Maybe convince Evelyn to come home and marry someone else, someone who will actually hand over cash. He stepped forward. But here's the thing, Grayson. Your daughter isn't a commodity. She's a person, and she doesn't owe you a damn thing. She owes me respect, Walter hissed. I'm her father. I raised her. Quote, you tolerated her, Evelyn cut in. Her voice was shaking, but she forced it steady. You tolerated me until you found someone willing to take me off your hands. Then you celebrated. I heard you, Father, that night after the letter came. I heard every word you and Mother said about getting rid of me. Walter's eyes went cold. So you've been poisoning him against me. I've been telling him the truth. The truth. Walter laughed, sharp, cruel. The truth is you've always been an embarrassment. Stubborn, inappropriate, unable to know your place. I gave you everything, and all you did was humiliate this family at every turn. You gave me a room and meals, and the bare minimum to keep people from talking. You never gave me what mattered. And what's that? A family that actually wanted me. The words landed like stones. Walter stared at her, and for just a moment something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. But it was gone in an instant, buried under years of pride. Fine, he said. Keep her, Mercer, but don't expect any support from Red Hollow. Don't expect trade agreements or partnerships or any of the connections that make running a ranch this size possible. You'll be isolated up here, alone. Good, Caleb said. Alone sounds perfect. Walter swung back into his saddle, movements sharp with fury. His hired guns followed suit. You're making a mistake, Evelyn, he said. When this falls apart, and it will, don't come crawling back. You'll get no sympathy from me. I won't need it. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he wheeled his horse around and rode out, his men following. Nobody moved until they disappeared over the ridge. Then Evelyn's legs gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, one arm around her waist, holding her steady. I've got you. You're all right. I told him. You stood up to him. You told him the truth. You were incredible. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. All the fear and anger and years of being unwanted came pouring out, and she couldn't stop it. Caleb held her through it, one hand on her back, not saying anything, just being there. Finally, the shaking stopped. Evelyn pulled back, wiping her eyes. Every worker on the ranch was watching, and she suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. "Sorry," she muttered. "That was human," Hannah said firmly. She'd appeared beside them with a cup of water. "Drink this." Evelyn drank. The cold water helped. "Everyone back to work," James called out. "Show's over." People dispersed slowly, still glancing back. Caleb guided Evelyn into the house and into a chair by the fire. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "Not really. Fair enough." They sat in silence. After a while, Hannah brought food. Evelyn ate without tasting it. "He's going to try to make trouble," she said finally. "He meant what he said about using his connections. Let him try. I've built relationships with ranchers across 3 territories. One angry man in Red Hollow isn't going to change that. You don't know him. He's vindictive when he's crossed. Then he'll be vindictive. But he's doing it from down in the valley, and we're up here." Caleb leaned forward. "Evelyn, I need you to understand something. I didn't refuse to pay your father out of pride or spite. I refused because buying someone is wrong. I don't care what the social customs are or how many people do it. It's wrong, and I won't participate. Even if it costs you business relationships? Especially then." She looked at him, really looked at him. At this man who'd built an empire in the mountains through hard work and honesty, who treated his workers like human beings instead of tools, who'd given her a choice when everyone else in her life had just given her orders. "4 days left," she said. 4 days. I think I already know my answer." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She stood, steadier now. "But ask me anyway, in 4 days. Do it properly." "Properly how?" "Figure it out. You're creative." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Yes, ma'am." That night, lying in bed, Evelyn thought about her father's parting words, about how he'd promised she'd get no sympathy when things fell apart. He still didn't understand. He thought she'd come to the mountain looking for sympathy or rescue or someone to take care of her. She'd come looking for a place where she could finally be herself. And she'd found it. 4 days, she thought. 4 days until she gave Caleb Mercer her answer. But in her heart, standing in the compound watching her father ride away, she'd already decided she was home. The morning after her father left, Evelyn woke to find the entire ranch watching her differently. Not with pity. These weren't people who trafficked in pity. But there was a new understanding in their eyes. She'd made her choice clear, standing in that compound, and everyone knew it. She pulled on her work clothes and went downstairs to find Hannah already kneading bread. "Morning," Hannah said without looking up. "Coffee's ready." "Thanks." Evelyn poured herself a cup and sat at the table. "Hannah, can I ask you something?" "Long as you don't mind me answering honest. When did you know this place was home? When did it stop being somewhere you were just surviving and start being somewhere you actually belonged?" Hannah's hand stilled in the dough. She looked up, flour dusting her forearms. "About 6 months in. I was sick, real sick, pneumonia, and I thought I was going to die. Caleb sat with me 3 nights straight, wouldn't let me apologize for missing work, wouldn't hear about me leaving once I got better. Just told me everyone gets sick, and that's what family does." She went back to kneading. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a job. It was a place where people actually gave a damn if you lived or died. Mom ko each potan. My father never sat beside anyone's sickbed in his life. Then your father was a fool. Hannah shaped the dough into loaves. You got 3 days left on your trial month, right? 3 days? And you already know what you're going to tell him. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Evelyn said, I do. Good, because that man's been walking around here like someone kicked his dog ever since you arrived. Try not to hope too hard. Be good to put him out of his misery. Evelyn almost choked on her coffee. Hannah, don't Hannah me, I got eyes. So does everyone else on this ranch. She covered the loaves with cloth. Just don't make him wait longer than you have to. Man's been patient enough. The day passed in the usual chaos. A wheel broke on one of the supply wagons. 2 of the hands got into a fistfight over a card game and had to be separated. Someone's horse threw a shoe. Normal disasters that required normal solutions. Evelyn found herself working alongside Anne, mending tack in the barn, while Anne's daughter played nearby with a rag doll. "Your father seems like a piece of work," Anne said, testing a strap for weakness. "That's generous. I had one like that. Sold me to my first husband when I was 16. Man was 43 and mean as a rattlesnake." Anne's hands never stopped moving. "I ran after 2 years, took my baby and whatever I could carry and just ran. Ended up here because I heard Caleb didn't ask questions about where people came from." Evelyn set down the bridle she'd been working on. "Did your husband come after you?" "He tried. Caleb met him at the property line with a rifle and half the ranch hands. Told him if he set foot on this land, he wouldn't leave it alive." Anne smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Man turned around and never came back. That was 8 years ago." "And you've been here since?" "Me and Emma both. This place saved our lives." She glanced at Evelyn. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. When Caleb says you're under his protection, he means it. Your father, your family, anyone who tries to hurt you, they'll have to go through him first, and they won't." The weight of that settled over Evelyn. Protection wasn't something she'd ever really had before. Her father protected the family name, the family reputation, the family wealth. But he'd never protected her, not when it mattered. "I'm staying," she said quietly. Anne's face broke into a genuine smile. "I know. Everyone knows. But it'll be good to make it official." That evening, Caleb found Evelyn in the stables checking on the horses. She was running her hand along the neck of a gray mare, talking to it quietly. "That's Juniper," he said from the doorway. "She was my mother's favorite. She's beautiful. She's also stubborn as hell and has a tendency to bite people she doesn't like." He walked closer. "But she seems to like you. Maybe she recognizes a kindred spirit." "Stubborn? And prone to biting." Caleb laughed, a real laugh, the kind that changed his whole face. "Fair warning noted." They stood there in comfortable silence, just the sound of horses shifting in their stalls and the wind outside. "I've been thinking about your father's threat," Caleb said finally. "About him using connections to isolate us. And I think he's bluffing. Most of the Valley ranchers can't stand him. They do business with him because he's rich and connected, but they don't like him. If he tries to turn people against me, it's just as likely to backfire." "You sound sure." "I am. But even if I'm wrong, even if he does manage to cause problems, we'll handle it, together." He turned to face her fully. "That's what I need you to believe, Evelyn. Whatever comes at us, we face it together." "I believe you." "Good." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I have something for you. Another something, besides the knife." He pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small blue stone. "It was my mother's," he said. "Only thing of hers I kept. I know we're not... you haven't officially..." He stopped, frustrated. "I'm doing this wrong." "You're doing it fine. I was going to wait. Ask you properly in 3 days, like you said. But standing here with you, I don't want to wait anymore." He took a breath. "Evelyn Grayson, will you marry me? Will you stay here and build this life with me, and let me spend the rest of my days trying to deserve you?" Her throat was tight. "You already deserve me. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the stone catching lamplight. Then he kissed her, careful at first, like she might break, but she grabbed his shirt and pulled him closer, and there was nothing careful about it after that. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Well," Caleb said, voice rough, "guess we should tell people." "Guess so." They walked back to the main house hand in hand. Inside, Hannah and James and half a dozen others were pretending not to have been watching through the windows. "We're getting married," Caleb announced. The room erupted. People cheered and clapped, and suddenly there was music and someone was pouring drinks, and it turned into an impromptu celebration that lasted well past midnight. Evelyn stood in the middle of it all, watching these people, her people now, celebrate something that would have made her family cringe. A marriage based on choice instead of contract, love instead of social advancement, truth instead of appearances. "You look happy," Martha said, appearing at her elbow with a cup of something that smelled like whiskey. "I am happy." "Good, you deserve it." Martha clinked her cup against Evelyn's. Welcome to the family, the real one. The wedding was planned for the following week. Nothing fancy, Caleb made that clear. Just a simple ceremony in the valley with whoever wanted to come. But the week leading up to it brought complications Evelyn hadn't anticipated. First, a delegation from Red Hollow arrived. Not her father this time. He'd apparently learned his lesson. Instead, it was 3 town councilmen, including Porter, the one whose brother-in-law, Evelyn, had publicly shamed 3 years ago. Caleb met them at this property line. Gentlemen, what can I do for you? Porter dismounted, all false smiles and political polish. Mr. Mercer, we've come to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. We understand you're planning to marry Miss Grayson. That's correct. Her father is a valued member of our community. There's been some concern about the terms of the marriage contract. There is no contract. Precisely the issue. Porter's smile never wavered. We're prepared to mediate, help you and Mr. Grayson reach an agreement that satisfies everyone. I don't need a mediator, and Walter Grayson doesn't get a say in this. But surely nothing. Caleb's voice went hard. The only person who gets a say in whether Evelyn and I marry is Evelyn, and she's already said yes. Now get off my land. Porter's mask slipped. You're making powerful enemies, Mercer. I'll survive. We'll see about that. They rode away, and Caleb stood there watching until they disappeared. Evelyn came out of the house where she'd been listening from the window. They're going to cause problems, she said. Probably. You could have negotiated, given them something small to save face. I could have, but then they'd think they had leverage. Better to make it clear from the start. They don't get to dictate terms up here. He looked at her. Does that bother you? That I won't compromise with them? No, it's just, I'm not used to someone standing up for me like that, without expecting something in return. Get used to it. The second complication came 3 days before the wedding. A fire broke out in one of the storage barns. It started in the middle of the night. By the time someone spotted the smoke, half the building was engulfed. Every able body on the ranch formed bucket brigades, fighting to keep the flames from spreading to the other structures. Evelyn worked until her hands blistered and her lungs burned from smoke. They saved most of the compound, but the storage barn was a total loss. Thousands of dollars worth of winter supplies gone. Standing in the ashes at dawn, Caleb's face was grim. This wasn't an accident, James said quietly. I found evidence someone said it deliberate. Oil-soaked rags in 3 different spots. Who? Don't know yet, but someone wanted to hurt us bad. Evelyn thought about her father's threats, about Porter's warning, about powerful enemies and revenge. You think this was them? She asked Caleb. I think it's likely. What are we going to do? Rebuild. What else can we do? He turned away from the ruins. We've got enough supplies to make it through winter if we're careful, and we'll post guards from now on. This doesn't change anything. But it did change things. There was a new tension on the ranch now. People looked over their shoulders. Workers took turns on night watch. The easy openness Evelyn had fallen in love with was still there, but underneath it ran a current of fear. 2 days before the wedding, Evelyn was helping Martha in the medical cabin when Anne's daughter Emma ran in, out of breath. Miss Evelyn, men are here. They're saying awful things to Mr. Mercer. Evelyn dropped what she was doing and ran. In the compound, Caleb stood facing 6 men she didn't recognize. They weren't wearing badges, but they had the look of hired law, the kind of men who twisted justice to whoever paid the most. Warrant for your arrest, one of them was saying. Charges of arson and destruction of property belonging to Walter Grayson. Caleb's expression was stone. That's ridiculous. I've been on this mountain for 3 weeks. We have witnesses placing you in Red Hollow the night his barn burned down. Your witnesses are lying. That's for a judge to decide. You're coming with us. Like hell I am. The men reached for their guns. So did Caleb's ranch hands. In 2 seconds, the compound had turned into a standoff. Evelyn pushed through the crowd. Stop! Everyone looked at her. This is because of me, she said. My father is trying to punish Caleb for not paying him, for letting me choose to stay. Ma'am, this is a legal matter. This is a revenge scheme, and everyone here knows it. Evelyn turned to Caleb. Don't fight them. It's what they want. They want an excuse to shoot you and call it self-defense. I'm not going to jail for something I didn't do. You won't. We'll prove the charges are false. But if you fight now, people are going to die. Caleb's jaw worked. She could see him calculating odds, weighing options. Finally, he lowered his rifle. Fine, I'll go. But James, I know what to do, James said grimly. We'll handle things here. They took Caleb in handcuffs, loaded him on a horse like a common criminal. Evelyn watched him ride away and felt rage burn through her so hot she thought it might consume her from the inside out. Martha touched her arm. What are you going to do? Evelyn turned to face the assembled ranch hands. These people who'd become her family. These people who trusted her. I'm going to Red Hollow, she said, and I'm going to end this. You can't go alone, Anne said. It's too dangerous. Then come with me. Anyone who's willing. Evelyn looked around at the faces watching her. My father thinks he can destroy Caleb by using the law as a weapon. But he's forgotten something important. What's that? James asked. I know where all his bodies are buried. An hour later, Evelyn rode south with a group of 8. James, Anne, Thomas the blacksmith, and 5 others who'd volunteered without hesitation. They made the 3-day journey in 2, riding hard and sleeping light. Red Hollow looked exactly as Evelyn remembered. Clean streets, proper houses. The veneer of civilization her mother prized so highly. It made her sick. Where first? James asked. The courthouse. That's where they'll be holding him. But when they arrived, they found the building dark and locked. A notice on the door said court wouldn't convene for another week. They're making him wait, Thomas said, drawing it out, making it hurt. Then we use the time. Evelyn turned to the others. Split up, talk to people, find out who the witnesses are, find out who's been paid off. My father's connections aren't as strong as they used to be. Someone will talk. They dispersed into the town, and Evelyn stood there in the fading light, looking at the building where her future husband was being held on false charges. She thought about the girl she'd been a month ago, scared and unwanted and ready to accept whatever scraps life threw at her. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who'd learned that love was worth fighting for, that family wasn't blood, it was choice, that the only person who could save her was herself. Evelyn walked to the jail entrance and knocked. A deputy opened it, looking annoyed. Court's closed. I'm here to see Caleb Mercer. I'm his fiancée. The deputy looked her up and down. Visiting hours ended at sunset. Then start them again. Evelyn pulled out a gold coin, one of the few valuable things she'd brought from home. Please. Money talked in Red Hollow. It always had. The deputy pocketed the coin and led her down a narrow hallway to the cells. Caleb was in the last one, sitting on a cot that looked like it had seen better days 20 years ago. He looked up when she appeared, and relief flooded his face. Evelyn, what the hell are you doing here? Saving you, obviously. She gripped the bars. Are you okay? Have they hurt you? I'm fine. Just angry. He stood and came to the bars, covering her hands with his. You shouldn't have come. It's too dangerous. Dangerous is my new specialty. She lowered her voice. I brought people from the ranch. We're gathering evidence, finding the real witnesses, proving this whole thing is a setup. Your father has the town council in his pocket. Not all of them, and not forever. His influence is cracking, Caleb. I can feel it. She squeezed his hands through the bars. We're going to get you out of here, I promise. Evelyn, don't argue. I'm not the scared girl who rode up your mountain a month ago. I'm stronger now. You helped me see that. So trust me. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled. Small, but genuine. I do trust you. I'm just not used to being the one who needs saving. Get used to it. Marriage is partnership, remember? Time's up, the deputy called. Evelyn leaned as close to the bars as she could. 3 days. I'll have you out in 3 days. I love you, Caleb said quietly. It was the first time he'd said it outright. The words hit her like a physical thing. I love you too, she said. Hold on. She left before the tears could fall. Outside, the others were regrouping. Found something, Anne said. Porter's brother-in-law, the one you embarrassed. He's been talking. Drunk, bitter. Says he was paid to testify against Caleb, but he's having second thoughts. Where is he? Tavern on 3rd Street. They found him exactly where Anne said, drunk and morose, staring into an empty glass. Evelyn sat down across from him. He looked up, squinting. I know you. You should. I'm the one who made you pay old Samuel what you owed him. His face darkened. That was you. That was me. And now you're trying to destroy an innocent man because my father paid you. Evelyn leaned forward. How much? What? How much did he pay you to lie? The man's eyes slid away. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Walter Grayson paid you to say you saw Caleb Mercer in Red Hollow the night his barn burned, but you didn't see him because he was on his mountain ranch 3 days' ride from here. So how much? Silence. Thomas stepped forward. Answer the lady. $100, the man muttered. He paid me $100. And you were fine sending an innocent man to prison for that? I got debts, family to feed. What was I supposed to do? Tell the truth. Evelyn's voice was cold. But since you didn't, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to the courthouse tomorrow and recant your testimony. You're going to tell them Walter Grayson paid you to lie. I'll be ruined. He'll destroy me. He's already destroying himself. His power is fading. But if you help us, I'll make sure you're protected, you and your family. How? Leave that to me. Evelyn stood. Tomorrow, first thing, or I make sure everyone in this town knows you perjured yourself for money. She walked out. Behind her, she heard the man call. Why should I trust you? She turned back. Because 3 years ago, I stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for himself when everyone else just watched. I'm still that person. So yes, you can trust me. Over the next 2 days, Evelyn worked like someone possessed. She visited everyone who'd ever had dealings with her father. She tracked down creditors and business partners and people he'd wronged. She collected evidence of his declining fortune, his desperate schemes, his willingness to lie and cheat to maintain appearances. And slowly, inevitably, the truth came out. Walter Grayson wasn't the powerful man he pretended to be anymore. He was drowning in debt, grasping at straws, using his daughter's rejection as an excuse to lash out at anyone nearby. On the third day, Evelyn stood in the courthouse and watched her father's case fall apart. Porter's brother-in-law recanted. 2 other witnesses admitted they'd been paid. The evidence of arson at Walter's barn was revealed to be staged. He'd burned it himself for insurance money and tried to blame Caleb. The judge dismissed all charges. Caleb walked out of that cell a free man, and Evelyn was waiting. They didn't kiss. They didn't speak. They just held each other in the courthouse hallway while justice creaked slowly back toward truth. You did it, Caleb said finally. We did it. All of us. Outside, the ranch hands were waiting. So were about 20 townspeople who'd come to watch the proceedings. When Caleb emerged, they cheered. But the moment was broken by Walter Grayson storming out of the courthouse, his face purple with rage. This isn't over, he shouted. You think you've won, but You'll what? Evelyn stepped forward. Burn another barn and blame someone else? Pay more false witnesses? Try to intimidate people who are tired of being intimidated? You ungrateful— I'm grateful, Evelyn interrupted. Grateful I escaped you. Grateful I found people who actually value truth over appearances. Grateful I learned what real family looks like. She moved closer, and her voice dropped. You wanted to get rid of me so badly that you handed me to the best thing that ever happened to me. How's that for irony? Walter's hands were shaking. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Maybe. But I'm nothing that's loved. Nothing that matters to people. Nothing that built something real instead of maintaining a lie. She turned away from him. Goodbye, Father. I hope someday you figure out what you lost. She walked away. Caleb fell into step beside her. The ranch hands formed a protective circle around them. Behind them, Walter Grayson stood alone in the street, watching his daughter leave for the last time. They rode back to the mountain in silence. When they finally crested the last ridge and saw the ranch spread below them, Evelyn felt something inside her chest unlock. Tomorrow, Caleb said. We get married tomorrow. No more delays. Tomorrow, Evelyn agreed. That night, she stood at her window looking out at the stars. The same stars that had watched her arrive a month ago, scared and uncertain. The same stars that would watch her marry the man who saw her for exactly who she was and loved her anyway. Below, someone was playing music. Laughter drifted up from the main house. Life continuing, resilient, and unstoppable. A knock on her door. "It's Hannah. Got something for you." Evelyn opened it to find Hannah holding a dress, simple and cream-colored, nothing like the elaborate monstrosity her mother had ordered. "Belonged to Caleb's mother," Hannah said. "He asked if I thought you'd wear it." Evelyn touched the fabric. It was soft, worn, real. "It's perfect." "Good. Because tomorrow you're becoming part of this family official, and I wanted you to know we're glad it's you. We're glad he waited for you." After Hannah left, Evelyn tried on the dress. It fit like it had been made for her. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. Stronger, surer, free. Tomorrow she would marry Caleb Mercer in front of everyone who mattered. Tomorrow she would make official what her heart had known for weeks. Tomorrow she would finally, truly come home. But tonight she stood in his mother's dress and let herself feel the weight of everything she'd survived to get here. Every cruel word, every rejection, every moment of feeling unwanted. All of it had led to this, to a mountain ranch where hard work mattered more than appearances, where truth was valued over comfort, where a stubborn, inappropriate, impossible woman could finally be exactly who she was meant to be. Evelyn smiled at her reflection. Let them call her difficult. Let them call her unwanted. She'd found where she belonged, and nothing, not her father, not the town council, not the whole territory, could take that away. The morning broke clear and cold, the kind of mountain dawn that made every breath visible and every sound sharp. Evelyn woke before sunrise, too nervous to sleep, and found Hannah already in the kitchen making enough food to feed twice the number of people they'd invited. "You're up early," Hannah said, not looking up from the pie dough she was rolling. "Couldn't sleep." "Normal for a wedding day. Come here, make yourself useful." They worked in silence for a while, just the sound of dough being rolled and the fire crackling. It reminded Evelyn of a month ago when she'd first helped in this kitchen, when everything was uncertain and she didn't know if she'd stay or run. "You nervous?" Hannah asked finally. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're taking it serious." Hannah cut the dough into strips. "Marriage ain't easy, even when you love someone. Especially when you love someone. You're going to fight. You're going to disagree. You're going to have days where you wonder what the hell you were thinking. You're supposed to be making me feel better. I'm supposed to be telling you the truth." Hannah looked at her directly. "But here's the other truth. When you find someone who sees you for exactly who you are and loves you anyway, you hold on to that. You fight for it. You build something that lasts even when everything else is falling apart. Is that what you had? With your husband?" Hannah's expression softened. "For 12 years, not nearly long enough, but every day was worth it." She went back to her work. "Caleb's a good man, Evelyn. He's got his father's strength, but his mother's heart. You're lucky to have found him." "I think he'd say he's the lucky one." "Then you're both right. That's how it should be." By mid-morning, people started arriving. Not just the ranch hands, but families from neighboring homesteads. Traders Caleb did business with. People who'd traveled for days to witness this. The compound filled with voices and laughter, and the kind of chaotic joy that came from people who actually cared. Evelyn watched from her window as they set up tables and chairs in the main yard. Someone had strung lanterns between the buildings even though it was daylight. Thomas the blacksmith was tuning a fiddle. Children ran between the adults, already excited even though nothing had happened yet. A knock on her door. "It's me," Anne's voice. "Can I come in?" Evelyn opened the door to find Anne, Martha, and Sarah Henderson, all dressed in their best clothes and carrying flowers. "We're here to help you get ready," Martha announced. "And before you say you don't need help, you do. Every bride needs help." They descended on her like a benevolent storm. Anne fixed her hair, weaving in small wildflowers. Martha adjusted the dress, Caleb's mother's dress, until it fit perfectly. Sarah, who was still recovering but insisted on coming, sat on the bed and talked about anything and everything to keep Evelyn from panicking. "I've never seen Caleb like this," Sarah said. "Yesterday he checked the weather 6 times. 6 times! Like he could control whether it rained on his wedding day." "Did he seem nervous?" "He seemed terrified, in a good way." Anne stepped back, examining her handiwork. "There, you look beautiful." Evelyn looked in the mirror. The dress was simple but elegant. The flowers in her hair made her look younger somehow, and her face, Her face was flushed with something that might have been fear or excitement or both. "I don't feel beautiful," she admitted. "I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff." "That's because you are," Martha said practically. "Marriage is jumping off a cliff and hoping you both learn to fly on the way down." "That's terrifying. Life's terrifying. Doesn't mean it's not worth doing." Downstairs, someone started playing music. The ceremony was about to begin. Evelyn took a deep breath. "Okay, I'm ready." She walked downstairs and out into the compound. Every face turned toward her. Every person smiled. And at the end of the makeshift aisle, standing under an arch someone had built from pine branches, was Caleb. He was wearing a clean shirt and jacket. His hair was actually combed, and he was looking at her like she'd hung the moon and all the stars besides. James walked beside her. She'd asked him to, since her father certainly wasn't going to, and James had looked so honored she'd almost cried right then. "You look terrified," James whispered as they walked. "I am terrified." "Good, so does he." They reached the arch. James squeezed her hand once and stepped back. Caleb took her hands in his, and she could feel them shaking slightly. The ceremony was performed by an itinerant preacher who traveled the mountain circuit, a weathered old man who'd probably married half the couples in 3 territories. He kept it simple and honest, no flowery language or lengthy speeches. "Do you, Caleb Mercer, take this woman to be your wife? To stand beside her in good times and bad? To build a life with her based on truth and respect, and whatever love you can hold on to when everything else goes to hell?" "I do." "And do you, Evelyn Grayson, take this man to be your husband? To stand beside him in good times and bad? To build a life with him based on truth and respect, and whatever love you can hold on to when everything else goes to hell?" Evelyn looked at Caleb, at this man who'd waited 3 years for her, who'd given her a choice when everyone else just gave orders, who'd stood up to her father and the town council, and anyone who tried to hurt her. "I do." "Then by the authority given to me by nobody in particular and everyone in general, I declare you married. Kiss her before she changes her mind." Caleb kissed her. The crowd cheered. Music started playing. And just like that, Evelyn Grayson became Evelyn Mercer. The celebration lasted all day and into the night. There was food and dancing and stories that got progressively more exaggerated as people drank. Someone gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Someone else gave a toast that made everyone cry. Thomas played his fiddle until his fingers cramped, then someone else took over. Evelyn danced with Caleb, then with James, then with Thomas, then with half the men on the ranch. Her feet hurt and her face hurt from smiling, and she'd never been happier in her entire life. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, she found herself sitting at one of the tables catching her breath. Caleb appeared with 2 cups of something that smelled strong. "Here, you look like you need this." She drank. It burned going down. "What is this?" "Whiskey Thomas makes in his cabin when he thinks nobody knows about it." "It's terrible." "Yeah, but it works." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "How are you holding up?" "I'm married to a man I met a month ago, and I'm happier than I've ever been. I think I might be insane." "If you are, we both are." They watched the celebration continue around them. People laughing, children running, the whole compound alive with joy. This was her family now. These people who'd accepted her without question, who'd fought for her, who'd traveled here to witness her happiness. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. For wanting me. For making me believe I was worth wanting." Caleb turned to face her. "Evelyn, you were always worth wanting. Your family was just too blind to see it." "I know that now. I didn't know it a month ago." "Well, now you're stuck with someone who's going to remind you every single day." He stood and held out his hand. "Dance with me. One more time. Then we can escape to the house and let everyone else keep celebrating." She took his hand. They danced as the stars came out and the mountain air turned cold and the music played on. And Evelyn thought about the girl who'd ridden up here a month ago, scared and unwanted and ready to accept whatever scraps life offered. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned that being difficult was actually being strong. That being inappropriate was actually being honest. That being unwanted by the wrong people just meant you were waiting for the right ones. Later, much later, they finally escaped to the main house. The celebration was still going outside, but inside was quiet and warm. Caleb built up the fire while Evelyn collapsed into a chair, exhausted and happy. I was thinking, he said, not looking at her, about what happens now. Now we live happily ever after? Now we work our asses off to make this place survive. Now we deal with whatever your father tries next. Now we face winter and all the problems that come with it. He turned to her. I need you to know it's not going to be easy. I know. There are going to be days you regret this, days you wonder why you stayed. Probably. And I'm not always going to be easy to live with. I'm stubborn and I make decisions without consulting people, and sometimes I work too hard and forget to eat. Evelyn stood and crossed to him. Are you trying to convince me I made a mistake? I'm trying to make sure you know what you signed up for. I know exactly what I signed up for. She took his hands. A life built on truth instead of lies. A partner instead of a master. A place where being myself is enough. That's all I ever wanted, Caleb. That's everything. He pulled her close, and they stood there in front of the fire, holding each other while outside the celebration continued and the mountain stood watch over everything. I love you, he said into her hair. I love you too. Even though I'm stubborn and difficult? Especially because you're stubborn and difficult. We match. He laughed, and she felt it rumble through his chest. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. And Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not because everything was perfect, but because imperfect with Caleb was better than perfect with anyone else. The next morning, reality arrived in the form of a courier from Red Hollow. Evelyn was in the kitchen helping Hannah make breakfast when James brought the man in. He was young, nervous, and clearly wanted to deliver his message and leave as quickly as possible. Mrs. Mercer? He looked between Evelyn and Hannah, uncertain. That's me? Evelyn said, the name still strange and wonderful on her tongue. The courier handed her a letter. From the Grayson estate. I was told to deliver it personally and wait for a response. Evelyn recognized her mother's handwriting on the envelope. She broke the seal and read, Evelyn, your father suffered a collapse 3 days ago. The doctor says his heart is failing. He's asking for you. Despite everything that's happened, you're still his daughter. Please, come. Your mother. Evelyn read it twice, feeling nothing at first, then a complicated tangle of emotions she couldn't quite name. Caleb appeared in the doorway. What is it? She handed him the letter. He read it, his expression darkening. You don't have to go, he said. After everything he did? I know I don't have to. Evelyn took the letter back. But I want to. Not for him. For me. What do you mean? I need to see him one last time. I need to close that door completely. She looked at the courier. Tell my mother I'll be there in 2 days. After the courier left, Caleb caught her arm gently. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm going anyway. They rode south the next morning, just the two of them. Evelyn had insisted. This was something she needed to do herself, without an army of ranch hands backing her up. The journey gave her time to think about what she'd say, how she'd feel, whether seeing her father dying would break something open inside her or seal it shut forever. Red Hollow looked smaller somehow when they arrived. Less intimidating, just a town like any other, full of people trying to survive and maintain appearances. The Grayson house looked worse. Clearly money problems had caught up to them. The gardens were overgrown, paint was peeling, the stable was half empty. Margaret answered the door. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. Evelyn? Her voice was flat. You came. Mother said father was asking for me. He's upstairs. Doctor says it could be days or hours. We don't know. Margaret stepped back to let them in. Mother's with him now. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Evelyn remembered it always being full of sound, servants moving, her mother giving orders, her father conducting business. Now it felt empty. Abandoned. They climbed the stairs to her parents' bedroom. Caroline was sitting in a chair beside the bed, and she looked up when they entered. Her face was drawn, older, all the careful beauty she'd maintained for years finally cracking. Evelyn. She stood. Thank you for coming. In the bed, Walter Grayson looked like a shadow of the man who'd ridden up to the mountain ranch making threats. He was gray, thin, breathing in shallow gasps. How long has he been like this? Evelyn asked. 3 days? He keeps asking for you. Caroline's voice broke. He won't rest until he sees you. Evelyn moved to the bedside. Her father's eyes opened, cloudy but still sharp enough to recognize her. Evelyn? It came out as a whisper. I'm here. I need... He stopped, struggling for breath. I need to tell you, don't strain yourself. No, I need... Another pause. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like smoke. Caroline made a small sound. Margaret, standing in the doorway, gasped. I was wrong about you, Walter continued. About what mattered. About... He coughed, a horrible rattling sound. I tried to break you, tried to make you into something you weren't. And when I couldn't, I tried to throw you away. I know. But you survived. You built something real, something that matters. His eyes found Caleb standing behind her. You protected her. Thank you. Caleb nodded once, saying nothing. Walter looked back at Evelyn. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I needed you to know. I was wrong. You were right. About everything. Evelyn felt tears on her face and was surprised to find them there. Not tears of sadness exactly, more like release. I forgive you anyway, she heard herself say. Why? Because holding on to anger would poison everything I've built. Because you're dying and I don't want to carry hate into whatever comes next. Because... She stopped, surprised by the truth of it. Because you're my father, and some part of me will always wish things had been different. Walter's hand moved weakly toward hers. She took it. Be happy, he whispered. Be everything I tried to stop you from being. I already am. He smiled, small and sad and genuine. Then his eyes closed, his breathing evened out, and he slipped into sleep. Caroline touched Evelyn's shoulder. He's been waiting for this, for you to come. Now maybe he can rest. They left the room. Downstairs, Margaret made tea with shaking hands. The estate's ruined, she said bluntly. Debts everywhere. The investigations exposed everything. The bribes, the fraud, all of it. William's family broke off our engagement. They said they couldn't be associated with scandal. I'm sorry, Evelyn said. Are you? After everything we did to you? Yes. I'm sorry you learned the hard way that appearances matter less than truth. I'm sorry you're suffering for father's choices, but I'm not sorry I left. Margaret laughed, bitter and broken. You were the smart one, getting out when you could. You can still get out, both of you. Evelyn looked between her mother and sister. The ranch always needs help. Caleb pays fair wages. It's hard work, but it's honest. Caroline's face went cold. You're suggesting we become servants? I'm suggesting you become people who work for what they have instead of living off lies and stolen money. We're Graysons, and the Grayson name is ruined. You can cling to it and go down with father's legacy, or you can build something new. Evelyn stood. The offer stands. If you ever want to start over somewhere people don't know your history, come north. I would never, Caroline started. Never say never, Margaret interrupted quietly. We might not have a choice. They stayed one more day. Walter died that night in his sleep, quietly, without drama. Caroline cried. Margaret made arrangements. Evelyn felt a complicated grief for the father who could have been instead of the one who was. The funeral was small. Most of their old friends and allies stayed away, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The few who came did so out of obligation rather than love. Evelyn stood beside Caleb and watched her father be buried, and she thought about second chances, about redemption, about whether a deathbed confession could make up for years of cruelty. She didn't have an answer. Maybe there wasn't one. After the funeral, she and Caleb prepared to leave. Margaret walked them to their horses. I meant what I said, Evelyn told her. If you need a fresh start, come find me. And do what? Scrub floors? Cook for ranch hands? Live honestly. Work hard. Build something that actually matters. Margaret looked toward the house, the crumbling estate that represented everything their family had been. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Winter's coming. They rode away from Red Hollow, and Evelyn didn't look back. That part of her life was over, finished. Whatever came next would be built on truth instead of lies. How are you feeling? Caleb asked as they climbed into the mountains. Free, Evelyn said. Completely free. Winter came early that year, hard and fierce and unforgiving. The first snow fell 2 weeks after they returned from Red Hollow, and it didn't stop for 3 days. Evelyn learned what Hannah had meant about survival in the mountains, learned about rationing supplies and keeping livestock alive in brutal cold, learned about cabin fever when everyone was trapped inside for days at a time, learned that marriage in winter meant fighting about stupid things because you were sick of seeing the same face every single day. She and Caleb had their first real fight in December. Something stupid about how to store grain. It escalated into something bigger about decision-making and partnership and who got final say on ranch business. Evelyn slept in the guest room that night, furious and hurt. In the morning, Caleb knocked on the door. "I'm still angry," she called. "I know, I'm angry too. Can I come in anyway?" She opened the door. He stood there looking as tired as she felt. "We need to figure out how to fight better," he said, "because we're both stubborn, and we're both going to have opinions, and we can't sleep in separate rooms every time we disagree." "So what do we do?" "We set rules. We agree that at the end of every fight, we talk it through. We don't go to bed angry. We remember that we're partners, even when we want to strangle each other." "What if I'm right and you're wrong?" "Then I admit it, and when you're wrong, I'm never wrong. Then I'll spend our whole marriage apologizing." He held out his hand. "Deal?" She took it. "Deal." They worked it out. Not perfectly, not easily, but they worked it out. And Evelyn learned that fighting with someone you loved was different than fighting with someone who wanted you to be something else. Caleb argued with her, but he never tried to change her. In January, a blizzard cut them off from the outside world for 2 weeks. They rationed food, kept fires burning, and did everything possible to keep everyone alive. When the thaw finally came, they'd lost 3 head of cattle, but no people. James called it a miracle. Evelyn called it persistence. In February, Margaret arrived. She rode up the mountain road alone, carrying 1 bag, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the 3 months since the funeral. "Mother's staying in Red Hollow," she said when Evelyn met her at the compound gate. "She's too proud to leave, but I can't do it anymore. I can't pretend that house is anything but a tomb." "You're welcome here," Evelyn said, "but you need to understand, this isn't charity. Everyone works, no exceptions." "I know." Margaret looked around at the ranch, at the mountains, at the harsh beauty of it all. "Teach me." And they did. Margaret learned to cook from Hannah, learned to mend from Martha, learned to survive from everyone. She was terrible at first, soft hands unused to work, pride that got in the way of learning. But she kept trying. One night, she and Evelyn were washing dishes together, and Margaret said quietly, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For everything, for never standing up for you, for letting Mother and Father treat you like you were nothing, for being too scared to be different." Evelyn dried a plate carefully. "I forgive you." "Just like that?" "Not just like that. It took me months to get here, but yes, I forgive you, because holding on to it would poison what we're building now." Margaret was crying. "I don't know how to do this, how to be this person." "Neither did I. You learn as you go." By March, the worst of winter was over. The snow started melting, revealing the damage it had hidden. Fences that needed repair, buildings that needed shoring up. The endless work of maintaining something in a place that wanted to destroy it. But they worked together. All of them. Evelyn and Caleb, James and Hannah, Thomas and Martha, Anne and her daughter Margaret, learning and growing, and all the others who'd chosen this life. One afternoon, Evelyn was helping James fix a fence when he paused and looked at her. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking. Year ago, you rode up here looking scared and uncertain. Now look at you." Evelyn looked down at her hands, calloused, scarred, dirt under the nails, strong hands, capable hands. "Yeah," she said. "Look at me." That night, she and Caleb sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was one of those perfect mountain evenings where everything felt possible. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, "about expanding. There's good land to the north that's not being used. We could double our operation in 5 years. That's ambitious. We're ambitious people." He looked at her. "What do you think?" And there it was. The partnership they'd built. Him asking her opinion because it mattered, because they were in this together. "I think we should do it," she said. "I think we should build something so big, that everyone who ever doubted us has to eat their words. He grinned. You're vindictive. I like it. I learned from the best. They sat there as stars appeared and the temperature dropped and the mountain settled in for the night. Somewhere in the compound, someone was playing music. Someone else was laughing. Life continuing in the face of everything that tried to stop it. Evelyn thought about the girl who'd hidden behind a parlor door listening to her family celebrate getting rid of her. The girl who'd believed she was unwanted and difficult and impossible. That girl had been right about being difficult, but she'd been wrong about everything else. She wasn't unwanted. She was fiercely wanted by everyone who mattered. She wasn't impossible. She was strong enough to survive everything thrown at her and build something better on the other side. She wasn't a disappointment. She was exactly who she needed to be. Hey, Caleb said, squeezing her hand. Where'd you go? Just thinking about how we got here. Regrets? Not even one. Good. He pulled her closer. Because I've got plans for us. Big plans. And they all involve you being exactly who you are for the next 50 years. Only 50? Fine, 60. But after that, we're both allowed to slow down. Evelyn laughed, and the sound echoed across the valley. Free and honest and completely herself. Her family had tried to throw her away like she was worthless. They'd sent her to a stranger hoping to be rid of her forever. They'd celebrated her departure like it was a victory, and in doing so, they'd given her the greatest gift of her life. They'd given her to someone who saw her value, who wanted her strength, who needed her honesty, who loved her exactly as she was. The unwanted daughter had become the woman who built an empire. The family embarrassment had become the heart of a community. The mistake had become the miracle. And every day for the rest of her life, Evelyn woke up in those mountains and proved that being difficult and stubborn and impossible wasn't a flaw. It was exactly what the world needed more of. She was exactly what the world needed more of. And she'd spent enough years believing otherwise. The stars wheeled overhead. The wind sang through the pines. The mountain stood strong against the sky. And Evelyn Mercer sat beside her husband, surrounded by chosen family, living a life built on truth and hard work and love that didn't require her to be anyone but herself. Perfect? No. But perfect had never been the goal. Real was the goal. True was the goal. Honest and difficult and impossible and free. Those were the goals. And she'd achieved every single one. Come on, Caleb said, standing and pulling her up. It's getting cold. Let's go inside. In a minute. I just want to look at it a little longer. At what? Everything we built. He stood behind her, arms around her waist, and they looked out at the ranch together, at the lights in the windows, at the smoke from chimneys, at the evidence of life continuing against all odds. We did good, didn't we? He said quietly. We did better than good. We did something that lasts. And they had. They'd built something that would outlive them both. A place where difficult people could be difficult without apology, where strength was valued over appearance, where truth mattered more than comfort, where being exactly who you were was not just accepted, but celebrated. The unwanted daughter had come home, and she was never leaving again.